Hello everyone and welcome to a new class. Today we are going to discuss Martin Luther King Jr. He is also one of the heroes who fought for the civil rights, and he was one of the activists who fought for equality as well for Black people. So as we discussed Rosa Parks, today we are going to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King, and I want you to watch this video. Let's watch it together.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most important leaders of the American Civil Rights Movement. That was the effort to extend equal rights to all people, regardless of race. Well, in the first half of the 20th century, that was a controversial idea. In many parts of the country, African Americans were barred from participating in ordinary life. They couldn't eat at the same lunch tables, go to the same schools, or even use the same bathrooms as white people. This practice of separating African Americans from white people was called segregation. In the South, segregation was enforced through Jim Crow laws. They made it illegal for African Americans to mix with whites. They policed black behavior too. African Americans had to live in separate neighborhoods, hold specific jobs, and talk to whites with the utmost respect. Try to fight it, and you risk jail time, injury, even death. There were no Jim Crow laws up north, but unspoken rules still kept African Americans apart. In many places, white homeowners would only sell their houses to other white people. These informal codes ensured that African Americans remained second-class citizens. Martin Luther King grew up in the midst of all that inequality. He was born in 1929 to a middle-class family in Atlanta, Georgia. Both his grandfather and his father were pastors at a local church. King attended religious colleges up north, in Philadelphia and Boston. He noticed black and white people mixing more freely than he'd seen growing up. Though these cities had their share of racial tension, they were a far cry from the way things were down south. Dr. King moved to Montgomery, Alabama with his wife, Coretta, in 1953. He became a pastor and community leader. Around that time, a local woman named Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give her bus seat to a white man. King joined forces with activist Joanne Robinson to organize a massive boycott of the Montgomery bus system. Most black citizens of Montgomery refused to ride the buses for over a year. Many were violently attacked just for walking instead of taking a bus. Dr. King's house was bombed, and along with dozens of other protesters, he was thrown in jail. But these injustices drew national attention to the issue. And in 1956, a Supreme Court decision banned segregated buses. After that victory, King helped organize a group of churches dedicated to nonviolent protests for civil rights. He was inspired by the life of Mahatma Gandhi, whose nonviolent leadership helped free India from British rule. Over the next decade, King led protests and marches all over the country. The biggest was the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the nation's capital to support civil rights. It was there that Dr. King delivered his momentous I Have a Dream speech.
Okay, remember this speech, I Have a Dream, because we are going to study this speech. It's very important.
One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Yeah, kind of gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? King's gift for public speaking helped inspire millions of people. His words gave them the hope and courage to believe in the future he envisioned. 2 years later, the protests he led throughout Alabama caught the world's attention. People watched in shock as local police turned fire hoses and attack dogs on peaceful protesters.
What do we call this? Police brutality.
Well, people often feel threatened by change. In fact, making folks uncomfortable was kind of the point of all this protest. In a letter written from an Alabama jail, King said, "Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and establish such creative tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue." In other words, things change only when conditions are made so stressful, people demand it. Oh,
I just want to comment here. Remember when Rosa Parks stopped using the bus and then there was the bus boycott and everyone stopped using the bus service. So when the government or when the community saw that they actually stopped gaining money from the bus company, then they decided to take the segregation laws and to make the black people and the white people equal in the bus.
yeah, King was arrested lots of times during these marches, but the result was worth it. His work pressured Congress to pass groundbreaking laws, moving society closer to his vision. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 overturned segregation laws around the country. In 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He went on to fight against poverty and the Vietnam War. Then, in 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee.
Assassinated, it means that they killed him.
His killer, James Earl Ray, was captured months later. King was only 39 years old, but in his short life, he changed the face of this country. Without his influence, who knows how long it would have been before equal rights were protected for everyone. Yeah, you're right. We still struggle with racial equality to this day. But thanks to Dr. King and other civil rights leaders, we know that great change is possible.
I have a dream today.
So now I just want to show you one of the protest or the march that Martin Luther led.
August 28, 1963. 250,000 Americans, black and white, young and old, descend on the nation's capital in a show of solidarity. It was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, but it would be remembered as a turning point in the fight for civil rights. Among the speakers, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who electrified the crowd with a stirring "I Have a Dream" speech.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
A few months earlier, racial tensions in the Deep South had erupted. News reports carried.
For tomorrow, what I want you to do is I want you to read this paper. You have you have it here with you. It's called the Civil Rights Biography, but this time it's for Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, I want you to read it all, and I will send you a video tomorrow with me reading it. And I also want you to watch this video. I will send you the link on the WhatsApp group. Okay, this is the speech of Dr. Martin Luther King, which is entitled "I Have a Dream."